Hi, I am Ellie of Faye and Ellie's Book Nook, and welcome to the Book Nook. So, a week or so ago, Faye did her DC graphic novels recommendation video, and I have volunteered to take on DC's younger, slicker little brother, Marvel, and that will also encompass Star Wars. So, these is my box of shame, aka all of my comic books, and there's a lot more up there. So I'm going to go through my favourite Marvel graphic novels over sort of, I think it's like the earliest I have is like from the 60s or something like that, and also my favourite Star Wars recommendations, so you guys have a bit of a balance going on. So let's get right into it. If you want to start with Marvel, my best choice is to go for this, the Definitive Avengers. It is a sort of summary of all the amazing Avengers plotlines from the very beginning, back in the 60s, all the way through to sort of a couple of years ago, I think, with the Avengers Disassembled plotline, which led directly into House of M. There's also a follow-up called Definitive Avengers Reloaded, which has got more stuff in it. They are huge books. They are not kidding around with this stuff, but it's a good place to start if you want a sort of overview of the history of Marvel, because the Avengers are basically at the heart of that. And if you want any idea about what's going to happen in Infinity War, the film next year, then I would start with this, Infinity Gauntlet, which is probably what they're going to be basing it on. There is two called Infinity War and Infinity Gauntlet, but this looks most like the one that they're going to be loosely basing it on, so you'll have some idea of what's going on when it happens in the cinema. But considering the sort of different routes that the MCU have taken, I wouldn't expect it to be a word-by-word adaptation of this. It is really entertaining and it is really well written. It's beautifully drawn. This is some old style comic book drawings. I can't remember when this was originally done, but that's a good one idea if you want a sort of idea of what's going to be going on in the next couple of years in Marvel. Now on to my favourite Marvel comic book run of the last couple of years. I have it in single issue, but you can get it as a published sort of book. This is the Scarlet Witch run. This was the first solo run for Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, who is played in the MCU by the bewitching Elizabeth Olsen. I can't actually believe that it took this long to do a solo run for Wanda Maximoff. She has been in the Avengers since the late 70s, I believe, but she's never had her own solo run, and this was the first time they did this. What's frankly really great about this series is that the art style changes from issue to issue to best reflect the story. So you get a real sense from just the way that it's drawn what the story is about and what sort of style they're using and trying to convey. This isn't really done in a lot of other comic books, so this was a brand new sort of idea, and I just thought it worked really well. It is a 15-issue run, I believe, and it was absolutely amazing, and I hope they do another one, because immediately after this run was finished they went into Secret Empire and they just sort of backtracked all of the character development that Wanda got in this series, so it was a real disappointment for me. At the same time that the Wanda Maximoff series was going on, we had the parallel run for Vision. This was an amazing run. It got so many good reviews. It was about Vision and having his own family, and he had a wife and 2 kids, and the daughter is now a member of the Young Avengers, I believe. It's just absolutely incredible. This was the issue that was about halfway through the series, which revolved around Vision's relationship with Wanda, and it was just frankly incredible. And as you can see, this beautiful cover right here. It was so well drawn. It was drawn in the same style throughout, and it was well written. There was a couple of issues with it, but I sort of overlooked most of them because the story overall was just beautifully done, and it gave a lot of character development to Vision, which once again was completely backtracked by Secret Empire. Secret Empire basically ruined everything. If you want an overview of Scarlet Witch and the Vision's relationship in preparation for Infinity War, where it will probably feature heavily if the set pictures are to be relieved, then I would recommend this, the Scarlet Witch and the Vision. They did have their own duo run somewhere in the 80s, I believe, but this is a collection of their sort of top moments, sort of like their greatest hits, if you like. Their relationship is so adorable, and I'm hoping they get back together one day, because they haven't been together for years. And on top of that, you can also look at the House of M. I really recommend this one. Even though it made a villain of my favourite character, Wanda Maximoff, this is such an interesting storyline. It features the Maximoff-Lenshire family heavily as the royal family of a parallel universe, if you like. It's just absolutely brilliant, this one. It kept me on my toes the whole time I was reading it. Right, so immediately after Avengers Disassembled, where Wanda Maximoff sort of lost her mind and went a bit crazy and killed a couple of the Avengers, this one starts with the Avengers deciding whether they're going to kill Wanda Maximoff, whether she has become too powerful to live. Pietro Maximoff decides to warn his sister and suggests that she creates a parallel universe using her reality-bending powers, but everyone's happy because then they'll forget that they were all going to kill her, and that's what she does because she's in such a vulnerable emotional state. And everyone wakes up in this parallel universe where everything is much better, but they don't remember who they are, except one person who does, and that's Wolverine, and he wants to make everything right. It's an interesting storyline, it's really quick and fast-paced, and this gives you all of the issues that you need to be reading, and I think there's a couple of extra issues because when they do events like this, they have the main storyline, which is in the House of M issue run, and other characters will have tie-in issues in their own individual runs. An excellent example of this is during the Civil War II storyline, which was pretty mediocre, but Wanda had her own sort of tie-in issue which focused heavily on her relationship between her and her brother, and it was super interesting, but it was not as connected as I was hoping it would be. She kind of avoided the whole Civil War II sort of scenario, probably because she remembered Civil War I and no one else seemed to, but that's a sort of example. And a couple of side issues do feature in this just to give you the basic plot, but you can go back and sort of look at every single issue if you like, sort of online if you want to get the full story, but this gives you the sort of basic, the bare bones of it. On to Star Wars. The Star Wars comics being put out by Marvel are absolutely amazing. They are focusing heavily on the gaps between the original trilogy because they can't really do anything about the sequel trilogy because everything's shrouded in darkness and spoilers and whatnot. So they have done a couple of runs trying to fill in the large gaps, particularly between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, because there's 3 whole years for them to play with there, and they've done some amazing work. But what I've really loved about the Star Wars things is that everything seems to inform the sequel trilogy. Nothing seems completely useless or completely sort of unnecessary. For example, this one, Shattered Empire, takes place immediately after the Return of the Jedi, and it features Shara Bay and Poe Dameron. And now, if you think you recognise that name, you are right. Poe Dameron and Shara Bay are the parents of Poe Dameron, who is one of the new trio in the sequel trilogy, and they were both part of the Rebel Alliance Army, Navy, Air Force, I don't know, military? Yeah, I'm going to go with military. Shara Bay was Luke Skywalker's personal guard for some parts of the war, and in this one she helps him out with a mission which is absolutely amazing, and I'm pretty sure it's connected to the sequel trilogy. I can't figure out how. So if you want to see badass women of colour kicking ass, then I would go for this. And speaking of badass people of colour kicking ass, Poe Dameron, I have spoken about this one before. This one is the story leading up to how Poe Dameron got on Jakku at the beginning of The Force Awakens. He is currently looking for Lord Santaka, but has been horrifically thrown off the beaten track at this point. We are about 25 issues in, I believe, and he still has not found Lord Santaka, but he's working on it. I promise he's working on it. This one's been really emotional for me recently because it features Leia heavily, and I believe they're working some sort of groundwork in there for what's going to happen in episode 8. For example, there was a funeral in one of the issues recently in which Poe referred to death as being luminous, and Leia said that she feared that soon she would too be luminous. So either that's a reference to Carrie Fisher or it's some sort of foreshadowing for Leia's demise in episode 8, but we'll have to see. But it's really focused on the relationship between Leia and Poe as a sort of surrogate son, because her actual son is a piece of trash, and sort of setting him up as the next big leader within the Resistance. So that's absolutely excellent. I cannot mention Star Wars comics without mentioning the Darth Vader runs. This is the first run, and this is the current second run. This run takes place between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and it details Darth Vader finding out about who Luke is, who he specifically is in relationship to Darth Vader, and deciding that he's done with the Emperor and the Empire as a whole, and he wants to take over and he wants to rule as father and son. and he starts laying the groundwork for that with the help of a junker named Dr. Aphra, who now has her own solo run, by the way, and I think you should check that one out because it's amazing. What I love about this series is that it fills in so many of the blanks about how Darth Vader found out about Luke being his son, how he reacted to that, how he didn't immediately get extremely angry, how he sort of has been plotting, and how it adds greater context to the idea that he was trying to get Luke to join him in The Empire Strikes Back, and that he was being sincere about that. The ending is particularly emotional for the Skywalker family, but I don't have that one in book form, I only have it online. And this is the current run, the 2017 Darth Vader run. They have handed this one over to different writers, which I think was an interesting and bold move, but they've still kept the artists, I believe. This one takes place immediately after that famous scene from the end of The Revenge of the Sith, where he's kind of screaming and shouting because of the death of his wife, and how he completed his training as a Sith Lord, and how he just kept on going down this very dark path. And this one really informs the beginning of that sort of long 20-year journey before A New Hope, and at the end of Rogue One. That amazing scene at the end of Rogue One, can't get over it. I would highly recommend anything that has a Skywalker in it. And speaking of, my absolute top recommendation, if you're going to read anything written by Marvel in the last couple of years, Princess Leia. This is Princess Leia. It was a short, very short little run that takes place immediately after the end of A New Hope, where Leia, who is completely distraught because of the destruction of her planet, decides to take up the mantle of leader of the Alderaan people. The Empire basically are trying to round up all of the Alderaan citizens who were not on planet when Alderaan was destroyed and kill them, as to keep the whole thing silent, keep it all hushed up, to stop people from complaining about it. And she is going around trying to single-handedly rescue all of her citizens and prove herself to be the worthy leader of Alderaan. It's an amazing series. It deals with her grief, and it deals with the planetary grief. It sort of puts more stock into the idea that an entire planet was just wiped out from the galaxy, and it sets up her as the next leader of the Rebel Alliance, sets up how strong and independent she was, and it was a great thing to read, very empowering to read, so that is why I recommend it. Beautifully written, beautifully drawn, very empowering, go for it. So that is the end of the Marvel/Star Wars recommendation video, which perfectly complements Faye's DC recommendations video. I will see you guys next week, and I am Ellie of Faye and Ellie's Book Nook. Bye!